First, I want to begin the two-part sermon. I guess we'll see how many people show up next week for the second part. Depends how good this week is. And they're connected. This week, we're going to begin with the world's most dangerous toys. Next week, we're going to begin with the world's most wonderful toys. This week is about wisdom. Next week is about happiness. But you'll see if you stick around this week and next week, they're connected. So the most dangerous of toys of all time, and then I'll share with you why I'm sharing this. But here they go. Maybe you own some of these. I owned them. I'm even guilty of buying a couple of them for my kids before I knew they were recalled. One of them is the CSI fingerprint examination kit. Did any of you own this one? I didn't. But if you did, you watched your kids walk around and dust for fingerprints. The only problem was they found that the dust contained asbestos. And our kids were playing with asbestos. Not a great toy for Hanukkah. Another one, and we actually bought this one, didn't know until afterwards that it was so dangerous, magnetics. Do you remember magnetics a few years ago? These little plastic balls, but inside were magnets. Sounds fun. They were fun. You create something out of nothing. The problem was little kids were swallowing these, and 2 magnets inside a child has horrible, horrible consequences and killed many children. Hannah Montana Pop Star card game. If you did own this, please do not admit that. It was not only deadly for, other reasons, it had arsenic in it, and they had to recall these toys because they had arsenic. There were Aqua Dots that came out a few years ago. They found out that Aqua Dots, when swallowed, had the same chemical compounds as the date rape drug. Snack Time Cabbage Patch Doll. If Cabbage Patch Dolls weren't good enough, they had to insert into this version of it metal jaws with teeth. And what did they find? Lo and behold, little kids like to stick their fingers in there, and it wasn't a pleasant experience when they did. Lawn darts. Do you remember this one? Lawn darts? I had lawn darts growing up. Who was the genius who invented a game where you have oversized darts and you throw them at each other out on the lawn? The Austin Magic Pistol. I didn't have this. I had a BB gun, which in the right context is fine. We used to use them shooting at each other with garbage can lids to block them coming at our direction. If that wasn't bad enough, the precursor to this was the Austin Magic Pistol, where you put in gunpowder and gasoline, you lit it on fire and shot fire out the front end of it. Sky Dancers. I remember Sky Dancers in the 1990s. They were basically Barbie doll meets the bottle rocket, and you launch it up in the air. The only problem was it had wings, and when it was coming down, they found out the wings were sharp, and they were chasing kids around with these Barbie dolls, and it wasn't a pretty sight. And there was the BB gun that made the top worst list of all time. Sit and spin, remember that one? Trampolines without the sides. Slip and slide. But here was my favorite, or least favorite, I guess. It's not exactly funny. The Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab. This was in the 1950s. Did any of you have the Atomic Energy Lab? Maybe you think it's obvious that giving uranium to children is a good idea, but they didn't think it was a problem with the Gilbert Atomic Energy Lab. It came with 2 vials of uranium so that you could create your own mini atomic bombs. And when you ran out of your own uranium, they came with prepaid postage little cards that you could fill out and get more uranium so you could build more little bombs. It would be laughable. You can't make this stuff up. It would be laughable if it wasn't so devastating that we've put these types of products into children's hands. And these aren't just mom and pop kind of one-off toys. These are major toy manufacturers that concocted these recipes. What's even more egregious, they're major corporations. They had on staff MIT-trained engineers and Harvard MBA graduates and BU lawyers and the cream of the crop in all these fields, and yet they still produced this garbage. Just goes to show you, right, that brains, knowledge don't translate to wisdom. That just because you're clever, because you're smart, because you're sophisticated, doesn't mean you won't concoct a doll with chomping teeth or a flame-throwing gun to put in the hand of a 10-year-old or plutonium-enriched toys. These were smart, clever, sophisticated, intelligent individuals who created these things. They just weren't wise. Wisdom is not connected to academic degrees. It is not connected to a GPA. It is not connected to income level. It's not even connected to age. Sometimes each of those things produce wisdom, but oftentimes there's an inverse relationship with academic degrees and so forth and wisdom. You don't have to have all of these things to be wise, and just because you have these accolades and these achievements certainly doesn't mean you are. It's true today. It was true in the time of the Torah. So this week's Torah portion, we're wrapping up Sefer Shemot, the book of Exodus. The book of Exodus revolves around the building of the Mishkan, the building of the tabernacle, the temple. It's the most important subject, as I always share, in the entire Torah. There isn't a close second. More ink is used over the description of the Torah than any other subject, than all of them combined. So you would think the designer of the tabernacle, the Mishkan, would have been Moshe Rabbeinu, the great Moses, right? The mighty prophet, or maybe his brother, Aharon, Aaron, the great orator, maybe their great-grandparents and Abraham, the visionary, or Isaac, the faithful one, or Yaakov, Jacob, the desert warrior, but it's not. Why are these individuals chosen to create the most important piece of architecture in the Torah? Because they don't have the necessary ingredients, not like some young nobody named Bezalel. We read the following about a young man named Bezalel. Nobody's heard about him. He didn't have the right credentials, right? He didn't have the right cachet, and yet he was chosen for the job. It says the following in this week's Torah portion. Moses said to the children of Israel, "See, Adonai, the Lord has called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Yehudah. And he has imbued him with a Ruach Elohim." This young man has a Ruach Elohim, a divine spirit. And he has Chokhmah, wisdom, and he has Tvuna, insight, and he has Da'at, knowledge. And most of all, he has a Chokhmat Lev. He has a wise, discerning heart. Why was Bezalel chosen but not Moses? Because Moses, at least at this stage in the game, didn't have what Bezalel had. Moses didn't have a chokhmat lev. What is a chokhmat lev? What is a wise, discerning heart? We're going to really talk about for the next few minutes wisdom. What is wisdom? We throw the word around as if we know what it means, but we need to unpack it. We need to really think about what does it mean to be wise. So what did Moses not have that caused him not to get the job? Moses was great in the moment. He was a great think on his feet, in the moment kind of guy. The problem was he didn't always think forward. So when we meet Moses, we meet him at the burning bush. And he's great at recognizing that there is a bush here and is burning and is not being consumed. But he's not great at projecting into the future, right, his abilities. So what happens? God calls out to him at the bush and says, "I've chosen you for the job." And Moses spends the next few chapters talking about how nobody's going to believe him, how he can't do this. He can't take that moment and extrapolate it into the future and see how it's going to work. Moses is the one who sees the taskmaster beating an Israelite, and he kills the taskmaster and seemingly does the right thing, but he's only good up until that moment. And then all of a sudden he panics about what the next step is, what the future holds, right? What are the consequences to his action? Moses doesn't think through the consequences time and again. Last week we had the golden calf. The golden calf was when the Israelites built this idol and they started worshiping it, and we like to blame it on the Israelites, but maybe Moses is culpable too. Because Moses is the one, after all, who created a codependent relationship. They were dependent on this man because his leadership style was always do as I say, right? Follow me. He didn't empower people. And when he wasn't home, the kids ran amok. And ultimately, it was as much his fault as it was theirs. He didn't think through the consequences of his leadership style. And then in a couple weeks, we have the final example where God says, "Speak to the rock, Moses, and it'll bring forth water." And Moses gets angry and he hits the rock. And it doesn't sound like the world's greatest crime, and yet he gets punished. What is his punishment? He's not allowed to be the leader anymore. And the rabbis argue why. And one of the commentaries says, because he didn't think about the consequences of losing his temper in front of his followers, and that he would never be able to recover the kind of respect needed by a leader in the desert leading the troops to the promised land. Moses, time and again, fails to live out what the Talmud says is the definition of wisdom. Who is wise, asked the rabbis in the Talmud? One who foresees the consequences of their actions. What does it mean to be wise? It means not only to be bold and to be smart and to take action, but to know that these choices have consequences. Every action has a consequence. To be wise means to see a step or two or three steps down the road and to see where these actions are leading. To be wise is to be able to take bits and pieces, right, and to weave them together to understand something greater than the sum of its parts. To be wise is more than knowledge. Here's the best definition I've ever heard of wisdom. And if you take away nothing, you'll take away this. It's a great cocktail party line. What's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, not a vegetable. My son loves to tell me this. Dad, Abba, tomato is a fruit, not a vegetable. Wisdom is knowing that you don't put it in fruit salad. It's a great line. Knowledge, knowing it's a fruit, tomato. Wisdom, knowing you don't put tomatoes in fruit salad. Wisdom is the ability to synthesize all of the components, all of the ingredients, and see something larger than other people see. And this is what Bezalel has. He has an ability to see what nobody else can see, and that's in his name. What is the Hebrew name Bezalel made of? Betzel, in the shadows, El is God. Right? Betzel, El, in the shadows is God. The Kabbalists say, what does that mean? That Bezalel had the ability to see the known within the unknown, to find light within the darkness, to see possibility where everybody else saw none. So Bezalel's gift was that he didn't need every experience under the sun to be able to move forward, right? He could take the bits and pieces that he had or that he got from others, and he could weave together something that made people feel certain and secure, to be able to move forward into the unknown. That is what wisdom ultimately is all about. It's one of the greatest gifts that we have acquired as a species, as human beings, over the past 50,000 years. I was listening to a great TED Talk by Dan Gilbert. You should watch this or listen to it on TED.com. It's called The Surprising Science of Happiness. He says one of the most important developments in human history, one of the leading contributions to happiness, is the development of our brain. It has tripled in size over the past, I don't know, however 2 million years. Over the past 2 million years, our brain has tripled in size, primarily one place in our brain in particular, the prefrontal cortex. I know nothing about neurology, but he does. He knows a lot about it. And what he shared was, what is this basically in layman's term, this front part of your head? It is the flight simulator. It is the flight simulator, as all pilots train before they get behind the controls in the cockpit. They train in a flight simulator. That way, they don't have to learn by experience of how to crash. Hopefully, they won't have to crash because they can have flight simulation through this technique. That's what our brain does. That is the gift of humanity that animals don't have. They don't have flight simulators. It's taken millions of years for us to be able to learn this trick. Flight simulators are what allow us to have wisdom. He uses the example, not of the tomato. Here's another great example, right? We don't have to put together, or Ben & Jerry's, he says, doesn't have to put together liver and onions and ice cream and taste it and convene groups and have testing to figure out that is disgusting. We have an internal flight simulator that can do the work for us. I've eaten an onion, I've tried liver, I've had ice cream. Each one of those things may or may not be good, but mixed together, it is disgusting. Wisdom is what allows us to take those bits of knowledge and to understand what it means and where it's going without actually having to concoct such a disgusting mess. Wisdom would have said, if you take plutonium and you put kids with it, right, that is not a great combination. To take Cabbage Patch dolls, which were just perfectly cute and fine, and insert metal jaws into them is not going to come out well. And to take lawn darts or any kind of darts and to put them into kids' hands is not a wise move at all. Wisdom, right, is not just Dumbledore, an old man sitting on high, discerning for us all. Wisdom is not just an old professor, right, espousing from the mountaintop. Wisdom is not a function of age. It's not a function of degrees. It's not a function of anything other than us using our God-given flight simulator to think about the consequences of our actions. Who is wise? One who foresees the consequences of her actions. So let me end with this great parable that I also found in preparation. Once upon a time, there was a young man who was an expert at tying his shoes. All day long, he would tie and untie his shoes, practicing a wide range of knots and creating new designs that were at once beautiful and highly functional. He had a knot for every situation and every season. He had a knot for strolling, a knot for running, a knot for kicking. He had a knot for attaching tools to his shoes. He had a knot for attaching a milk bottle so that one might have a milkshake by the time he got to his destination. He had a knot for attaching a weight so as to improve leg muscle tone. The young man had a great deal of knot-making know-how. It came to pass that local artists and architects found his shoe tying unlike anybody else's. It was so impressive. They bestowed him with accolades and titles and degrees. They called him the master shoe tyer and gave him awards. The sculptors gave him an award for his knot that was shaped like a beaver. The architects gave him an award for his knot shaped like the Tower Bridge of London, and on it went. But soon the local folk noticed a change in the master knot tyer. He began to scoff at other forms of art. He dismissed them as meek and weak and inferior. Old people, worn-outs, know-nothings. Everybody became to the knot tyer nothing more than foot fungus. He devised breathtaking new designs everywhere he went. He broke all the records. He even constructed an entire boat out of recycled shoe material and shoelaces, which won him a small following at the academy. And it goes on and on. The young shoe tyer was on a roll, proving his worth. And of course, he kept up the practice of constantly tying and untying his shoes, trying to master it, to find that one knot that no other human being has ever made. One day, while crossing the street, he stopped to untie his shoes so that he might recreate a butterfly. He spotted a moment earlier, because on this day, like every other day, his highest priority was attaining excellence in shoe tying, this mastery of knowledge of tying knots in shoes. He was intensely focused on his narrow specialization to the exclusion of everything else. Moreover, he had recently broken new ground, or so he thought. He had come to believe he could create new forms of life using shoelaces alone. He was convinced that he merely had to make knots in the forms of a beating heart, a pair of eyes, wings like the wings on the butterfly that he just saw. In many ways, he had become a god. And then he bent over and he was tying this perfect knot, and all of a sudden he saw the light. No, actually, it was two lights, two bright lights as he was tying his perfect butterfly. There in front of him was a car that squashed him like a bug. The shoe tying man may have been a master at tying shoes, but in the end, what good is it to be a butterfly in the realm of tying shoes when you can't even cross the road like a bug? Right? And so this man, this master shoe tyer, was a master in one particular area. In his particular area, he knew that like no other. He knew his slice of the pie, but he didn't know the rest of the pie. And what we need now more than ever are not just master shoe tyers. We need people with humility to continue to find mastery in their particular area and their profession and their passions, but to back out of that and to say that my slice of the pie isn't the entire pie. We need people not just with knowledge and not just with mastery in certain areas. We need people with wisdom in this community, in this country, and this world. What good is it being a master shoe tyer if we can't even cross the street?